Hello and welcome to the history of Ra. Ra was the Goa'uld system lord who personified the Egyptian sun god, and the first to discover the Tari. His mate was Hathor, by whom he had a son, Heroer, and his brother was Apophis. His elite Jaffa were the Horus guards. Because of his power, authority, and cunning, Ra was the most powerful of the system lords. Despite the animosity, system lords feel for each other. Ra was recognized as the supreme system lord of the Goa'uld Empire, a title which made him nominal emperor of the Goa'uld. It was because of this and his supposed murder of Egera that the Tok'ra took their name, which literally means against Ra. After some 10,000 years of totalitarian rule, Ra was finally killed by Colonel Jack O'Neill and Dr. Daniel Jackson, who ringed an enhanced nuclear warhead on board his ship after the Abydonians rebelled and he was forced from the planet. The first Goa'uld dynasty. Nothing is known of Ra before he appeared in 22,000 BC at Apep's side, an underlord alongside Nut and Troth, who was given ownership over a portion of the Atok territory and forces after his death at the hands of Apep. United under the rulership of Apep, Ra and his kind swept across the Milky Way galaxy like a plague, taking many worlds under their control and very nearly wiping out the Unas. It was during this time that Anubis grew in Apep's favor, eventually earning a place at his side and becoming his most trusted advisor. By 17,800 BC, Apep's original sons and daughters, Ra among them, became jealous of Anubis for the favor he had with Apep. It was perhaps only fitting that Anubis killed Apep. They banded their forces together in order to defeat Anubis. The battle raged for hundreds of years, very nearly decimating the Goa'uld themselves, taking many Unuses with them, before Anubis was defeated in 17,400 BC and banished by the Goa'uld collective. Ra instated himself as the new ruler of the Goa'uld Empire, reinstating the old order which had been put in place by Apep. It was at this time that Ra also banished Thoth for his creation of the unstable sarcophagus, though Thoth's understudy Telchak remained. The second Goa'uld dynasty. With the Unuses of P3X888 in short supply and the Goa'uld symbiotes growing once more at a steady rate, Ra and the other Goa'uld were forced to push the limitations of their species. By 16,000 BC, Ra had managed to solidify his authority and appoint a new form of rulership to govern the Goa'uld, and thus the System Lords were formed with Ra as the Supreme System Lord. Ra stated that entry into the body was awarded by a vote from the current members, creating a power system that served for thousands of years. Joining the first ranks of the System Lords were Osiris, Isis, Tiamat, and finally Yu, who at that time was thought to be a progressive ruler. During this period, Ra also took Egera as his wife, though others such as Hathor would later fill this position. By 14,000 BC, the Goa'uld discovered small quantities of naquadah, which caused Ra to petition the System Lords for a new era of expansion, offering exclusive rights and access to the now dwindling Unuses in supply for shipments of the valuable material. Their attention diverted away from the gaining power of their own. The System Lords set about exploration in order to gain more and more naquadah. It was perhaps because of the expansionist nature that the Goa'uld ran afoul of the Asgard for the first time in 13,860 BC. Seeing the Goa'uld for what they were, the Asgard immediately declared themselves enemies of the System Lord collective, and the Goa'uld responded in kind. Relishing the opportunity to flex their muscles, the Goa'uld soon struck against the Asgard. But it became apparent that they were more than a match for the stolen technology of the Goa'uld. The Goa'uld begrudgingly retreated, and having lost the coordinates for their home planet, and thus primary source for hosts, Ra once again called for stockpiles of naquadah, as well as putting an end to the ritualistic cannibalism which had been a part of the Goa'uld society for generations. Nearly 4,000 years later, with the resources running low, the System Lords performed a daring attack against both the Asgard and the Furlings, which struck a resounding effect. Rather than winning the war, however, this simply caused the two races to fight back even harder, and in the years that followed, the Asgard dealt the Goa'uld many major setbacks, though strangely did not press the attack. Perhaps if they had known the danger that the Goa'uld would pose in the galaxy in years to come, the Asgard would have pushed back harder. Despite the lack of a head-on attack, many skirmishes and bloody battles raged on for several centuries, and somehow Ra found himself leaving his Unis host in order to take the body of Asgard Fimir. However, the Asgard physiology began to reject Ra. Worse, in 9177 BC, he was injured in battle with the Asgard. Fleeing his Asgard pursuers, Ra found a lush world in an alien system, Earth. It was there that he found the solution to his lack of a host in a race of primitives who bowed to his divinity, the Ta'ri. Transferring himself into one of these primitives, Ra became infused with a new vigor and life, soon discovering that they provided a near-ideal host for his race. Planting a Stargate, which he had brought with him, the original remained undiscovered in the ice of Antarctica, Ra claimed Earth as his own. On Earth, Ra quickly enslaved the human race, using the Stargate to keep in contact with the other Goa'uld and informing them of his new bounty. The System Lords soon fought against themselves for the right to claim some of the Ta'ri, but Ra instated a system which gave each System Lord stewardship in order for them to visit the planet and claim some followers who were taken to a world of the Goa'uld's choice to act as breeding stock. Ra also divided the planet into strict geographical lines to ensure that no System Lord would encroach upon another's territory. Ra himself took some of his followers off-world to a planet known as Abydos, where he used them as slaves to mine Naquadah for himself. Things seemed to be going well for Ra, as his rulings of the System Lords seemed to be working better than any before him. However, in 9002 BC, Satesh managed to coax Osiris and Isis into attempting the assassination of Ra. This ended badly for the two, as Ra stripped them of their titles and forcibly removed them from their hosts, putting them in canocopic jars, so that they could suffer for eternity. Because of this, Satesh went into hiding so that Ra could not take vengeance on him. It was soon after this, around 8721 BC, that the renegade Anubis returned from his banishment as head of a conquered army, and came with the promise to eliminate the Asgard in exchange for absolute loyalty and control of the Goa'uld. Furious at such pomposity, Ra assembled his own army and rallied several other System Lords behind him in order to once again defeat Anubis. Despite his previous victory, most Goa'ulds took this opportunity to either turn against Ra and join forces with Anubis, or simply stand on the sidelines to see which ruler came out victorious. The end result was Anubis being defeated once again, but before Ra could deliver the final blow, Anubis made his escape through a Stargate from assistance within Ra's forces. Having played on Ra's distraction, Solkar seized control of Earth before Ra could return and transformed it into a vision of hell, making clear plans to seize Ra's position as Supreme System Lord. Furious, Ra threw Solkar off Earth with the help of the other System Lords, most notably Kronos and Apophis. Solkar fled on a starship, and though his power was diminished, Solkar continued to battle against Ra and all of his followers, particularly Apophis. In 4006 BC, Apophis dealt a critical blow to Solkar's forces, which once again stabilized Ra's rule. Though again, Solkar survived and went back to rebuilding his forces. Sometime before 3000 BC, Ra populated the world of Sekhet Hept with the slaves he had rescued to work for him. It quickly became one of his most dedicated religious centers. But a few decades after it was first colonized, it was cut off entirely from the Stargate network. Though Ra was no longer able to visit his people, their belief had already been built into their society, and no word of rebellion on Earth ever reached them, so they continued to serve him for thousands of years. In the original timeline of Earth, the Ta'ri became aware of the truth behind the Goa'uld, learning that they were not in fact all-powerful gods, but simply beings with advanced technology, and so rose against their oppressors, choosing the moment when the System Lords were at their most complacent. And indeed, when Ra was overseeing his other territories, they overthrew their oppressors as well as their Jaffa guards, killing several on-planet Goa'ulds and burying the Stargate. While the loss of the Ta'ri was a great affront to Ra, his continuing battle with the Asgards demanded more of his attention, and so, as he had several other breeding planets, he simply let Earth be. Having witnessed the stagnation of the Goa'uld for several millennia, as well as Ra's signature desire to wipe out the Asgards, the Queen Ingira spawned a legion of symbiotes in 1002 BC, which opposed the ways of Ra in order to challenge the balance of power. To add insult to injury, she even named one of her children Tok'ra, literally meaning against Ra, and began her rebellion against the other Goa'uld. Ra's queen, Hathor, one of the last Goa'uld who remained on Earth after the Stargate was buried, was later imprisoned in her tomb in 332 BC for all eternity. Luckily for her, her tomb had a sarcophagus, which kept her alive for thousands of years before she was freed by a team of archaeologists. Hundreds of years later, in 37 BC, the Goa'uld lost 2 key worlds as well as several other vital installations. Suspecting at first the Asgard, Ra later discovered that it had in fact been a traitor in his midst, and so convinced a meeting of the System Lords to deal with the situation. It was at this meeting that Ingira finally revealed her act of betrayal, and so was sentenced to eternal damnation inside a stasis jar on Pangar, though she too was found thousands of years later, and also freed. Because of this, Ra and the other Goa'ulds outlined several new measures to keep control of both the Goa'uld queens and the Naquadah in check. 1996 AD. Nearly 2,000 years later, the first team who traveled from Earth through the Stargate to Abydos encountered Ra. Realizing that they were Tau'ri, he decided to send a nuclear warhead that they had brought back to Earth, enriched with Naquadah, which would cause an explosion 100 times greater than originally intended. He also ordered Dr. Daniel Jackson to execute Colonel Jack O'Neill and the others, lest the Abydonians doubt their god, taking an amulet with a symbol that Catherine Langford gave Jackson. A group of youths, having learned about the truth of Ra, helped the Tau'ri to escape. Jackson and Kowalski encouraged the natives to rebel against Ra. The youths and the Tau'ri hijacked the Naquadah tribute being sent to Ra's mothership, and Ra ordered the warhead sent to Earth. At that point, the attack began. Confined to just their numbers, the battle began with the Horus Guards, easily overpowering them. Jackson also ringed aboard the mothership, hoping to revive Sha'ri, who died. Ra discovered them and attempted to kill Jackson with his hand device. However, as this was going on, O'Neill used the transportation rings to decapitate Ra's first prime, which also took Jackson and Sha'ri off the ship. Moments later, Casfu and the rest of the Abydonians arrived en masse, rebelling against Ra. Believing Abydos lost, Ra took his ship into orbit. O'Neill had activated the warhead, but Ra had disabled the deactivation. Unable to stop the countdown, O'Neill and Jackson ringed the warhead aboard Ra's ship while it was orbiting the planet, destroying the ship and finally killing Ra. Thank you for watching the history of Ra. Special thanks to Stargate Fandom for all information you heard today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you can. If you have, thank you, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.